Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Power of Social and Physical Activity. This webinar series is brought to you by CanDo Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Laura Allen, Associate Director of Programs for CanDo MS. I will be your moderator this evening. I'm excited to be here with you for our second webinar of 2021. As you may have noticed, we've made some changes to our program offerings in 2021. Here's a look at our February programs. Every month, our programs build on one another to help you keep the momentum to develop new skills and habits. This month, we'll continue our focus on building new relationships and strengthening existing ones. The upcoming Jumpstart and coaching programs offer you a great opportunity to connect with experts and peers to tackle your unique situation and questions. Visit our website to learn more and sign up. We will save about 20 minutes at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. If you have a question during the presentation, you can type it in using the question box found in your control panel. This presentation is being recorded and will be archived on our website. You can download a copy of tonight's presentation and additional resources from your control panel. Our speakers this evening are Kathy Costello and Kathy Zakowski. Kathy Costello is the newest member of the CanDo MS team. She recently joined our team as the Vice President of Programs. Prior to joining our team, she held the role of Associate Vice President of Healthcare Access at the National MS Society. Welcome to the team, Kathy. Kathy Zakowski is the Senior Director of Patient Management, Care, and Rehabilitation Research at the National MS Society. She manages the Society's research portfolio focused on clinical and rehabilitation care, as well as development of the Society's Wellness Initiative. Thank you for joining us this evening, Kathy.
Thanks for having me.
And now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Kathy C.
Thanks so much, Laura. It's really a pleasure to be here, and particularly having this great opportunity to co-present with my friend and colleague, Kathy Zakowski. We made quite a team when we were both at the National MS Society, so it's really nice to be able to co-present with you here tonight. And good evening to everybody else, and thanks for joining the webinar. Tonight, as you heard, we're going to be talking about social connections and social activities and why they're important. What are the roadblocks and barriers, and what are some strategies that we can use to overcome them? You can see with the objectives on the screen what we hope to cover and how we hope this will help you. And so we want to talk about how staying connected with others benefits your health and well-being, and there's some interesting research that we'll share about that. We want to recognize those barriers, the MS barriers, and then other circumstances that increase our sense of isolation and create challenges in just maintaining a relationship, let alone creating new ones. And then we'll talk about exercise, which is an interesting activity, of course, that can help with social connections and can foster them and help them to grow. And then finally, as Laura's already mentioned to you, there's lots of resources and more learning that you can participate in. This is kind of like the overview, the 100 level course, if you will. And this will certainly provide what we think is great information. But think about participating the rest of the month, because that's when you can really dive in, and some of the really specific questions that you may have and strategies that you may want to learn, you'll be able to learn those and talk to other people about them at that time. So, of course, I just said we're going to talk about social connections. So, of course, let's have a slide about wellness. So you may be wondering why we're going to start there. But throughout the presentation, I think that you'll hear how social connections and social activities impact our wellness. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about that. So wellness actually isn't a thing. It's more of a process. And it's a process that every human is involved in throughout the course of their life, where we're actually striving to be more successful, more satisfied, have better health, lead a more productive existence. Some people characterize this process as a journey. So think about a journey. It has swerves, turns, steps, hills, and roadblocks all associated with it. So During our lives, we're constantly learning new information. We have increased life experiences, and we combine these when we're faced with challenges to make lifestyle choices that influence this wellness journey that we're on. So many of you have probably seen something like this. Whenever there's a definition of wellness, there's often the next step is dimensions of wellness. Sometimes there's 4, sometimes 6, sometimes 8, but they all revolve around pretty much similar themes. And these are not static or siloed. Of course, when you show them on a slide, that's exactly how they look. But keep in mind that they're very interrelated, and that's the reason for the arrows. There could be plenty more arrows because they could be going across the slide. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of time to talk about each of these because you'll learn the impact of social connections, both positive and negative, on these different dimensions of wellness. So just in brief, when we talk about physical wellness, most of us can visualize that, right? So that's how we develop healthy habits. The attention that we have to regular physical activity and lifestyle physical activity, our sleep, our eating habits, trying to eat a healthy diet. Also, this is about eliminating harmful habits such as smoking and other risky behaviors that many people unfortunately engage in. And in addition to attention to physical wellness, there's other dimensions that I'll mention are all going to impact physical wellness. They're going to have a strong influence on how healthy we're able to be. So research has shown us that when we do pay attention to our physical health, it actually can add years, quality years, to our life, and it can enhance the enjoyment that we have as we live our lives. So when we look at home and work, this is the ability to achieve a balance between our home life and our work life. We always hear about work-life balance, and that's exactly what this is about, because anyone who's worked long hours at work and does that consistently knows darn well that those relationships at home and those social connections really are going to suffer, and vice versa. If you're having to spend an awful lot of time at home for a variety of reasons, that's going to influence and negatively impact that work life. So a balance is really what's necessary. So when someone is engaged in motivating, interesting work and has that balance, that's when we're moving towards wellness in this arena. We also like to think that we could work in an environment that suits our personal learning style. We want to feel inspired and challenged, and that's not always true when we work. Often over time, we may start to have some negative feelings about our workplace, but being able to work within that, to understand that, and to maybe make changes can often help with that balance. When we think about our relationship health, this is about how we interact with others, and this obviously has lots of applicability to our conversation this evening. And so our relationships vary in type, they vary in intensity, longevity, and they're going to include family, our closest relationships, our friends, but also healthcare providers, our healthcare team, our coworkers. Our relationships often are the support that we need during difficult times and can enhance our resilience when we're going through a difficult patch. Growth and improvement here, so moving towards a higher state of wellness in relationships, is building healthy relationships, nurturing the relationships that we have, developing supportive relationships that can help you as an individual, but also help that other person, and fostering a connection with those around you. So perhaps not the deep relationships, but having connections and having a social sphere of people that you're able to connect with. When we think about intellectual wellness, we're thinking about how we can open our mind to new ideas and experiences, and then we can apply these to the decisions that we make. We can apply these to our interactions and our connections that we have with others. So this is about our desire to have lifelong learning, to learn new concepts, learn new skills, seek challenges. These emotionally or intellectually stimulating activities are actually quite beneficial to our overall cognitive health. And the more cognitive reserve that we can build up over our lives can help us as we get older, or if we have conditions that can negatively impact our cognitive health. When we look at spiritual wellness, this is often confused with church and our religious belief, but it's actually partly that, but it's also our values, our ethics, the principles that we live by, our moral compass. And it's being connected to something that's bigger than us. And so we use this moral compass to make decisions, actually, and also to choose who we wish to interact with. Spiritual wellness at its best is when we can live each day without judgment and in a way that is consistent with our values and our beliefs. And finally, emotional wellness. This is our ability to handle our emotions in a constructive and in a positive way. This is about our ability to provide self-care. How do we relax? How do we manage stress? How do we develop better resilience and more inner strength? So it begins with self-awareness and understanding the feelings that we have and trying to see them in a more positive way. This can certainly be challenging and is an area that can impact certainly all other aspects of wellness, and an area where we may find that we need external assistance to help us reach a higher level of wellness in this area. So tonight's webinar is about social connections and social activity. And I think you can see, just as I've described these dimensions, where our connections with others can impact these dimensions of wellness and where the dimensions of wellness can impact our social connections. So this is a very interesting quote that many of us have heard: no man is an island entire of himself. Every man is a piece of a continent, a part of the main. And this was written by an English writer back in the 17th century, actually, and who at the time was very sick. And he turned from writing poetry and prose to writing a book of meditations. And he meditated upon this notion of no man is an island for quite some time. And what he was realizing is that we're not totally self-sufficient, that we need each other, and that we can't live totally alone, that when we're connected to others, to everyone, both are better. The group that we're connected to, or the individuals that we're connected to, and we ourselves are better off because of our connections. And it suffers when we're unable to make those connections. So there's more to this. There's more to this, and it even talks about when we lose connections and what happens when people important in our lives are lost and that connection is severed, and how difficult it becomes for people to kind of right the ship, if you will, and to reconnect with others. So it's interesting to me that many of the concepts that John Donne talked about in this meditation are completely relevant today when we're talking about social connections. So as it turns out, we are profoundly social creatures. The sense of social connection is a fundamental human need. As far back as humankind can be traced, we have traveled, hunted, and thrived in social groups, and for good reason. Humans who were separated from the group, like in a tribal situation, were really vulnerable to much danger and severe consequences. So when our connection needs aren't met, we don't function as we're meant to. We break, we fall apart, we may become numb, we ache, we may even hurt ourselves or others, and we actually get sick. Our connections vary and serve different purposes, but every one of them is important to our overall wellness and health. And as with our relationships, our connections may include our family, our friends, our neighbors, our healthcare team, support groups, clubs, teams, coworkers, Facebook groups, right here, right now, the people that are on this webinar and those that participate throughout the month in our other programs are forming connections and hopefully a network of support. So there's been a substantial amount of research that's been done in the area of social connections in isolation and in loneliness. And for those of you who might have participated in the fall and towards the end of the year, we talked a little bit about isolation and how dangerous that can be for people. So the research has revealed that strong social connections lead to a 50% increased chance of longevity. I'm in for that. Social connections strengthen our immune system. There was even research that showed that the genes that are impacted by social connection They also code for immune function and for inflammation. So that when it's kind of a inverse relationship, so that when your relationships suffer, inflammatory response can actually go up. So social connections can help us recover from illness faster, and it may lengthen our life, as I mentioned. People who are well connected to others have lower rates of mental illness, less anxiety, less depression. Their ability to be empathetic increases. And they also have higher self-esteem. They become more trusting, more cooperative, better team players when they have good connections. So people feel that they have a greater purpose in life when they are able to connect with others. We feel that we've talked a little bit about resilience, and we know that that when people are better connected, that can be a buffer to challenges that people face and can improve that resilience. So there's a familiar term that we all hate, social distancing. It would be also great if we had someone wearing a mask or two people wearing masks. So this has been a trying year. Who would have thought back in February of 2020 that this would be still going on in February of 2021? I know I said many times, listen, by summer, it's all going to get better. We're all going to be good. Maybe by the fall. Well, maybe by winter. And here we are. So it's been a trying time. And our social connections have really been under fire with the COVID-19 pandemic. For a year, we've been isolated from our families, somewhat, from our friends, from coworkers. Many people have lost their jobs, have severed those connections completely. And sadly, even prior to the pandemic, close connections such as confidants, close friends that you can share your deepest secrets with, were diminishing over time. And in fact, many people reported, this is before the pandemic, that they had no close friends, no one that they felt that they could confide in. And that's only gotten worse, and that percentage has only gone up with the pandemic. Loneliness actually represents the leading reason that people seek psychological counseling. And many more people have identified this need since the start of the pandemic. And those who are not socially connected, as I mentioned, are more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, and even antisocial behavior. So of course, this sounds totally dreadful. So it's really a good time for me to turn this over to Kathy Zuchowski, because Kathy's actually going to talk to you about why there's hope here and what can be done to really improve and reestablish those social connections so that we can enjoy their benefits to our health and to our wellness. Kathy?
Thanks, Kathy. So I'm a scientist, so I feel like I want to talk with you a little bit about how research can help us understand this a little bit better. And I think studies can help us support new ways to treat MS, and ideally research can confirm what's true and remove what biases that may overshadow the truth. So I'm going to start by talking about a study, but don't let your eyes glaze over. I won't go into a lot of detail as much as to try to bring out what I think is important about the study. So a study by Dr. Freeman and her team. Dr. Freeman's a physical therapist in the UK. She and a team set out to better understand the experiences of people who have more severely impaired MS, and to better understand the solutions and their social isolation. And so they just went straight to the people. They started asking questions and had face-to-face interviews, kind of in-depth interviews with a group of people who have more severe impairment. And they kind of came out with 4 themes. One was to define isolation. One was to better understand what they thought the causes were. One was to understand the impact of isolation. And the last was to identify eases of isolation. So I'm going to talk with you. I wanted to define isolation. Kathy's done a really great job so far, but isolation in the terms of this study was really people who defined being on their own, being cut off or out of reach from others. People who described how difficult it was to get out. People who described they were isolated because they had to rely on others to do so much. and not having the usual interaction with the world. Now, this could be because of COVID, but in this particular case, it was specifically because of their MS, and COVID just is added on top of all of that. So some of the participants highlighted things like, social isolation starts with my physical restrictions, but it was perpetuated really through social experiences and kind of negative emotional responses that I received. So that made my physical restrictions seem even worse. And so then I decided I just needed to stay away from everybody. Some participants described social isolation in the context of choice and control. So they weren't able to choose what they wanted to do unless someone was there to support them. And some described that this feeling of isolation really changed their interaction with others and their perception of how others viewed them, and how this made them change their perception of themselves. And just as Kathy mentioned earlier, this really brought upon them kind of this feeling that they had no purpose in life. And this was a big problem. So within the study, I really encourage you to read the paper, mostly because they bring out specific interviews and quotes from people about isolation. And some of the ways that they described to ease isolation included things like a resilient attitude. But interestingly, they described some people had kind of a level of resilience that didn't appear to be due to input from family and friends or technology. They just appeared to be able to have a more positive adaptation to their situation. So for example, they described someone who described, now I have more physical disability because of my MS, but that also gives me more time to do the non-physical things, like to keep up with my friends better. So you can see kind of the flip side to the negative. They described kind of having a positive mindset, so focusing on positivity to their situation. And some people had an easier time with this, and some people had a harder time doing that. They described concepts like, working with what you have, and you have to sink or swim, and I've made the decision to swim, that kind of thing. They described group support, and the positive responses were people who found that interaction with others who understood their situation helped them to come to terms with their MS. But they also described some people who had negative responses to group support. Reports of people who had, nothing in common with the people at the support meetings, and this kind of facilitated more isolation. They described, support at specialist MS centers, getting expert care could really help. But there were some negative responses to that as well. So some had the perception that, services are too busy nowadays, and it's really complicated to get into those systems. There was an interesting idea of easing technology. So enabling people with MS and their carers to make choices about care and lifestyle. For example, one person described being able to ask their husband out for dinner, and they actually paid ahead of time using technology so that they could go to a dinner and this person could feel like they were doing something for their spouse, and they could go out and have dinner, and it could be somewhat more normal. And of course, the importance of family and spousal care partners. So they described in this paper, everyone who was supported or felt supported by their spouse spoke about how that really enabled them to interact with the world. And they acknowledged that the intensity and the complexity and the fragility of the carer relationship really promoted identity changes, but that they knew they needed that support to be able to combat the isolation that often occurred. So as you can see on the right of the slide, the key thing that I wanted to really bring out from this paper, where they really interviewed so many people and described what isolation was like and what are some ways to ease isolation, they found that people's experiences, not surprisingly, are really personal, and that any approach to help deal with social isolation needs to be based on considering how to think positively about life and how to make that work for themselves. And that it wasn't just about being near people, it was really about having a sense of hope and a sense of purpose for what you are doing with your life. So keeping that in mind, we wanted to ask a question, and the question is, have you felt lonely during the pandemic? And if so, please select one of these. And our other Kathy is going to describe the results for everyone. So please take a moment to answer.
Okay, so it looks to me that there are some people who sadly have been feeling lonely all of the time, and more likely though, people feeling it a little or most of the time. And I think that I certainly can say that have felt that way. How about you, Kathy?
Yeah, and I think it varies, right, day to day, often even hour to hour at times. But I think that's a fair response that, you know,
I agree.
we all feel it a little bit, and I'm happy to see that it isn't all of the time.
That's right. That's right. And hopefully we'll be able to address some of those issues so that all of the time gets reduced even more.
Yes, exactly. So I wanted to now talk about the choices we have for connecting. And I can see some of the questions coming in about, you know, how do you connect? So we'll get to some of those answers, I hope. And I hope we'll have some discussion time too for that. But there are choices, right? We make a choice. Do we want to connect with one person on more of an intimate level? Do we want to connect with a few good friends? Or do we want to connect with a larger group to learn information or for entertainment or for something like this, like a seminar like this? The other choice that we have for connecting, you know, largely because of COVID-19, has been that we use technology. But even the use of technology, we have choices, right? We can use our phone, we can use an iPad, we can use a computer. And these have similarities, but they provide a different level of an experience. And so knowing that we have choices is one important thing. So knowing that there is something you can do is kind of the first step. Now, there are a lot of barriers to social activity, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think it's important to identify these, in part because I think it might validate many of the listeners, because I think our experiences are also personalized and different. So, for example, physical environment. Our barrier to social activity would be very different if we lived in a rural versus an urban environment. It depends on, you know, what is our home environment like? Do we have space to move around? Do we have, within our community, to be socially active, do we have facilities that are accessible for parking and for even just being able to get into and out of the building? In terms of social environment, do we have support from our providers and family? Because as I explained in that study earlier, to be socially active, often you need to ask for help and accept help and to get somewhere where you can be physically active. Within the social environment, do you feel excluded or not invited? So that's a big barrier that would make you want to not try very hard to be socially active. And then there's the social stress, right, of being socially active, which, you know, often can be very prohibiting in terms of taking that next step. And there's also barriers in terms of health. So how fatigued do we get? You know, it's fatiguing to listen to people and to interact and be flexible in how you're thinking. That this fatigue that comes with MS might be a significant barrier. The fact that the symptoms in MS fluctuate make it really hard, and not everybody understands that, right? So that makes it hard when you're in social situations. The fact that you know, all of us have some type of comorbid health conditions, obesity, smoking, diabetes, all of these can make social interaction challenging at times. Then there's also cognitive and behavioral limitations, right? Just that fear or apprehension of having to put yourself out there, knowing that you have some symptoms that might show up as you're involved in the social interaction. That frustration that comes from kind of knowing you have word finding difficulties, for example, or your memory isn't what it used to be, and that frustration, how that will affect your social interaction. In terms of cost, I mean, money always gets in there, doesn't it? It really, in order to be socially active and to work out or have a fitness plan, you need often to go to a gym, so that costs money, and there are fees to see the clinicians or the professionals that you need, and you know, even just getting to a facility to be socially active, there could be costs for transportation. And then, you know, things that aren't mentioned very often, even if you can get yourself somewhere, you have a family often or childcare needs that require fees to have that covered. Time, I will say that time is a barrier. I like to think that it's kind of a perceived lack of time, and that if we learn to problem solve, that there are ways around the lack of time. Other barriers are lack of energy or motivation. So kind of being unclear what your goal is. Is it really important for me to put myself out there? Because I'm really hesitant to be socially active. But if I have a goal that might help someone get over that, that initial fear. And then COVID-19 provides all the barriers that Kathy mentioned, right? Just having to maintain social distance, the fear that comes with not wanting to get someone else sick or not wanting to get sick yourself. Kind of that fear because you don't have enough information to make decisions that are so important. And the social stress about, what are others' opinions for what you're doing, and making a choice to be socially active. And I might be judged by that, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Those are all barriers that I think are important to recognize and really contribute to why people might be more isolated. So if we talk about how do we adapt these barriers. Now, I set this up in the dimensions of wellness, because I really liked how Kathy laid out that wellness is this very complex, there's multiple elements involved, and if one element isn't going very well, that can really affect your overall wellness. So if we start with relationships, I laid this out so that we could get ideas for how to adapt and really instill relationships. And so one thing is, you still, even with COVID-19, there are ways to stay in person, and you can play card games. You can even have a conversation as long as you're maintaining the 6-foot social distance, right? But using a computer and, the blue logo, there's the Zoom logo, using platforms that allow us to have teleconferencing like this. So at least you can see the person as they're talking, and that allows us to read facial expressions and to really be more empathic towards one another. And then the little fire logo there is really just, trying to be creative in how we still stay socially active, like sitting around a fire in the winter. It allows you to stay warm, you're still socially distant, and you're outside, so you're keeping yourself safe. But it's just one way to maintain relationships.
Kathy, I wanted to mention that there's an app that I've used when I connect with my grandchildren, and it's called Caribou. And the coolest thing about it is that, we're not, obviously we can't be in the same place all the time, but when you use this app, the book that I'm reading to my granddaughter is the book that she's actually seeing too. You can use a smartphone or a tablet, but we can point to things and we can read together. And it's, it's not the same as being there, but, it's been a pretty cool connection to be able to make in this really terrible time. And we love it. And we're going to keep using it even when we're able to be back in the same place. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a good example. And I feel like I'm hoping we can get some other ideas from people because I do think sharing these ideas is one way to combat isolation. It gives us choices again.
Right.
Okay, so if we move on to spiritual, and as Kathy said, it can mean a religious affiliation that you have, or it can be something more about spiritual growth. But there are ways to still participate in these kinds of activities. I know in our neighborhood that our church actually has services outside, so we can still go to the service and be with our community, but maintain a social distance. But there are also apps, meditation apps, that can really help foster that need for spiritual growth, even if we can't do it with a large group of people.
Before I move on, we've got a number of questions coming in. Can you say the name of that app again, Kathy Costello?
Yeah, it's called Caribou. I did put it in the question box, but Caribou. And I just searched it. Someone told me about it, and I looked it up in the App Store, and boom, there it was. And there's a free version, of course. There's always the free version, and then there's that enhanced version. And of course, it's my grandchild, so of course I did the enhanced version. But it was inexpensive. Of course I did. But it was inexpensive, and there's things you can actually draw and color together, color at the same time. It's awesome. It's such an awesome use of technology.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, there usually are free apps. Like, I would look around before you spend money on something, make sure, because they're on YouTube, for example, there's just so many opportunities there. So physical wellness, there are ways to adapt barriers. So taking a walk outside, maybe going hiking with friends, even just eating outside, socially distanced. I can tell you that I visited my elderly parents, and we sat in our garage with the garage door open, but we were 6 feet away. We had a little triangle essentially, and we each sat at our little table and had dinner. And at least I felt like I could physically talk with them while we were sharing a meal. So I think there's being together physically often makes a bigger impact than always being virtual. So this is looking at home and work. And the way I interpreted this, there are a lot of, the use of technology really allows us to facilitate different avenues of shopping. So grocery shopping, getting takeout dinners, shopping for clothes or other needed items, and then getting curbside pickup, or even having them delivered directly to you. And I wanted to bring up one particular app called Amazon Smiles that Kathy Costello reminded me of. And every time you shop and use this through Amazon, they will donate a percentage of the purchase to a charitable organization. And you can name that charitable organization, and the National MS Society is actually one of them. But there are others too. So it made me feel like, I need to get these items, but if I can use this other system, that's my other way of giving back. And it was a good feeling. So I encourage you to try that. So emotional, using video conferencing like we're using here to see people's faces. I mean, this is the basis of virtual gaming that children use quite a bit, which, it offers a way to connect and have something in common if you're playing a game or even exercising. I can tell you the company Peloton has made a lot of money off of this idea of having a stationary bike in your home, but giving you the feeling through technology that you're exercising with a group. And so I really encourage you to take advantage of those kinds of systems to keep yourself fit. All right, and the last one is intellectual wellness. So this is, I really wanted to promote this idea of self-management. So these are skills that can help you grow in setting goals, making choices, and staying balanced, kind of keeping that idea that I have choices that I can make, and it might not be ideal, but I can make choices to ease this feeling of isolation and promote social connectivity. You can use virtual technology to play cards, enjoy board games together, attend seminars like this, where you can keep, growing in lots of different ways. So keeping these ideas in mind, we have another question for you. So what have you done during the pandemic to connect with others? We came up with a few options here, but add your own ideas to the chat after you answer the question. Just take a moment if you answer.
And people have been doing that already. It's great to see in the chat. I love it. There's quite a few things here. Trivia games. There's another website that was mentioned. I have to adjust my my progressive lenses here. There it is. BoardGameArena.com. A board game website to play with others.
Yep. There's also a Bible study called Genesis that was mentioned in the chat.
Cool. Yeah. All right, here we go. All right, so a lot of people are using the Zoom calls, walking at a safe distance with others, talking more on the phone. I love that one. One of the maybe good things, if we can find good things to come out of a pandemic, is connecting with people that we hadn't spoken to in a long time. And it's been terrific just to pick up the phone again. Participating in webinars, of course. What an excellent idea. And let's see, what do we have? Laura, maybe you can see it better than me. There's a whole thing.
One person talked about dating apps, which I didn't mention, and absolutely important. Great idea.
Oh, karaoke. I'm not sure I'm very good at that one.
There's something called House Party, a house party app. That's right.
That's right. Dog parks, Wordscapes. Oh, I've been using that one a lot too.
Yeah. So have I.
I'm going to go for virtual coffee. That to me sounds just delightful.
Yeah.
Right. This is great. This is like a new library of things that we should be sharing with people to give us choice, right?
Ooh.
This is fantastic.
Bingo.
Bingo. Oh,
Yes,
man.
that's right.
Fun. Zoom yoga, MS gym, Zoom knitting group, Bible study. This is a very connected person. Congratulations on all of those outlets.
Wine on the screened-in porch. I like that.
Mm. So we combined your fire pit idea in our neighborhood, Kathy, where someone had a portable and they brought it to what we had driveway parties. And so we would socially distance placing our chairs, and you would bring your own beverage along with you. But you could stay until the evening when it would start to get cooler. And we would put a table in the middle with individual snacks. So somebody would buy them, then you could walk up to the table one at a time and you could kind of grab your snack safely. But people said at the end of it, my God, it almost felt normal, right? And we're craving this ability to be with others. So I think these ideas are absolutely fabulous. Great.
Okay, maybe I'm going to move on, and I'm going to only highlight a couple of facilitators because I feel like we have so many in the chat box here. But I wanted to make sure, to touch on each of the barriers that I talked about earlier. So in terms of physical environment, making sure that the environment you're going to is accessible, has instructions that are visually able to be read, those kinds of things. In terms of social environment, really looking for healthcare providers and coaches or role models. And for this one, the social environment, I really encourage you to learn to kind of accept assistance from others when people offer, because that will allow you to still experience this social connection. In terms of health, having goals, using fatigue management approaches. In terms of the cognitive and behavioral facilitators, make sure and realize that when you make steps forward, that's an accomplishment. So it might not be the step that you would have taken 10 years ago, but just the step of increasing and making the step towards a social connection and stepping outside of your comfort zone. That's an important thing to realize, that you made that effort, and to recognize the benefits you get from that. I'm gonna go to lack of energy or motivation. So kind of learning to overcome fears. And I know this question came up earlier. One way to overcome fears, in my experience, has been to talking with friends, finding people that have a similar experience to you and can encourage you. But realizing that small steps are really important, and that it might be that a therapeutic or professional relationship is needed to give you the skills that you need to be able to get out there and increase your social network. And in terms of COVID-19, planning activities ahead of time, getting vaccinated. So if possible, the CDC and the National MS Society have guidelines, and overall it's encouraging in terms of encouraging people with MS to be vaccinated, but also to read information from reliable sources as you search the web. I wanted to mention this, and I won't belabor the point, but because of my love of research and how I think we learn so much from research studies, I wanted to highlight Dr. Chun-Yi Xu and the way she studies physical activity and how we get people to be physically active. So she's an associate professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she's a rehabilitation counselor. And she studies how to optimize people's participation in healthcare, community resources, and fulfilling and life fulfillment. And so one thing she has tried to break down, I will say, is how do we get people to be physically active and stay physically active? And so she uses this approach, a model, where she identifies kind of 4 important areas that are part of how we intend our thought process for when we intend to exercise. So let me go through them kind of briefly. So you have to have action self-efficacy. And all that means is, what is my confidence in myself that I will do what I say I will do? So if I say I'll be more active, then I will actually do that. We have to be aware of outcome expectancy. So I have to balance the pros and the cons and the consequences of making that behavioral change, of actually exercising. I also have to take in, what are the risks that this brings to me? Does it make it higher risk for falls, for exhaustion, or for strain on my caregivers? And what is the severity of my MS? And what barriers will I struggle with because of my MS? So that's all part of the motivational phase. So our ability to mediate these intents. So if I have an intention to be physically active, I have to act on that intention. I have to cope with the physical and mental barriers that I have, and I have to plan for the perceived barriers. Now, the reason this kind of model is helpful is because they've been found through research studies from Dr. Chun-Yi Chu. These models are predictive of exercise behavior. So they could actually be used by healthcare providers to know what may be limiting people in terms of their exercise. So research can help healthcare providers identify the elements that may be limiting for us from exercising and sustaining an exercise program. So it's important that we can break things down in this way, because it gives us a way to offer solutions. Now, before we can finish this, I really wanted to be sure we touch on the importance of exercise and its place with social activity. So the National MS Society convened clinical and research experts in the fields of MS, exercise and rehabilitation and physical activity to reach some kind of consensus on what is the optimal exercise and physical activity recommendations for individuals with MS at all disability levels. And there are two main points I want you to go home with. One is that exercise and lifestyle physical activity are beneficial and achievable regardless of level of disability. And second, it is that we recommend a minimum of 150 minutes per week of exercise and or 150 minutes per week of lifestyle physical activity. Okay, so before you tell me that is impossible, that is too big of a number, let's think about it in terms of that's really 20 minutes a day, and that 20 minutes can be broken up, right? You could do 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. And this doesn't have to be exercise in terms of of repetitions and walking and getting on a stationary bike. This could also be just cleaning your house. This could be getting on your hands and knees and cleaning your bathtub. This could be vacuuming. But I want you to keep two things in mind as you kind of let this percolate, this idea of 150 minutes, which is the goal. That progress towards these targets needs to be gradual. So it's based on your abilities, the things you like, and safety. So keep that in mind. It also, if your disability increases as a result of physical activity or exercise, it may become more challenging. So then stop and get some specialist help to ensure that you're safe and that you're doing the right kinds of things. And I know Can Do itself has been referring to this 150-minute goal as one of the SMART goals, right? So I really encourage you to take this in and try to incorporate physical activity with your social activity.
So 150 minutes just seems like a lot to me. I mean, and how does somebody know? How do you decide? You know, and many people have done this. You know, I'm going to get in shape. So you go out and you do something and you wear yourself out and you ache all over, and you, of course, then don't go back. And so, you know, you start, stop, start, stop. So first of all, 150 minutes seems like it's a lot. So help me understand how I can incorporate that. And then how do I know when to stop? Like, particularly if I'm just starting off.
So I think a rule of thumb should be when you increase your activity, do it slowly. So I wouldn't add 20 minutes of exercise every day starting tomorrow. I would say, okay, let's start tomorrow. Let's put in 5 minutes of exercise and let's see how my day goes. Because you want to make sure that after you exercise, if you take a little break for an hour, that you are rejuvenated enough that you can continue on with your day. If you can't do that, then you've done too much. Even if 5 minutes is too much, start with 1 minute, but be systematic. That's my recommendation. Try to be gradual but consistent so that you don't let days and days go by. You try to do a little bit every day if you can.
So 150 minutes is the goal. We don't have to just go out there and do it the first time around. We can work our way reasonably to that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I think we have one more question, don't we?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you think you can participate in exercise or physical activity? We put a couple of suggestions, and please check all that apply. But again, if you have new ideas, please put them in the chat or the question box so we can share those.
Okay. So let's see what we've got here. All right, so a lot of people with indoor activities, so all kinds of different things. And I saw that in the question box where people were writing in some of the things that they're doing at home with either yoga or other activities. MS Workouts, that's a great program. I love the fact that some people are able to be outside. That's a great place to be. Sadly, household activities, and you know, it's the bane of my existence, but it is activity. So I tell myself that. So that's cool. And then we're putting some things in the chat, and here it goes. You people are awesome. I'm loving reading all this stuff. Again, we've got to like put all this together for everyone. Dancing. Oh, that's fantastic. Several people.
Gardening, right? Music. I have seen some of the travel. There are some travel shows that allow you to explore other cities visually, and they encourage you to stand and actually walk as you're watching this. So that's one thing. Health club programs I'm seeing: biking outside, kick sledding, a chair on runners' use on packed snow or on ice. I've never heard of that. Oh, someone asked, what is MS Workouts? Kathy, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to find it so I can share a little bit more information. So my understanding is it's a website that has workouts for people with MS. And so it attends to some of the aspects of MS that maybe a regular gym and a trainer wouldn't, because they don't have an understanding. So I think that there are things that people can do through the website for exercise. So it's a virtual world, but I think it can be helpful for people to participate. You know, I think where did I read? Ability is the antidote for disability. So the more that mobility is the antidote for disability. So the more that we can move, the more strength, the more flexibility, the more endurance. And so those are the very things that for many people living with MS are among the challenges. And so this ability to move in any of the ways that we've mentioned is going to help to those ends. Not to mention the benefits for cognition and mood, which are tremendous.
One last thing I wanted to bring up there is the MS Dream Centers in Rhode Island. I have been a part of that, and they do have really wonderful virtual programs there too.
So I'm going to just fly through this last slide of takeaways because we want to have at least a few seconds for questions. There's been a bunch. I've answered a few in the box, but anyway, I think that we've gotten through this webinar tonight, the importance of social connection, and that you've read, and we will put together the many ways that people have identified to connect with others. It's just fantastic that everyone has participated. We know that there's barriers, but working on strategies to overcome them. Please participate the rest of the month, because that's really where you're going to dig into some of those more specific issues. And we know that exercise, as we've just learned, has a multitude of benefits, including social connection. So Laura, do we have time for one or two questions, perhaps?
We do. And you know, the first thing that I'm going to ask you, Kathy, is I think it would behoove us to explain to people about some of our upcoming programs. Because the question I'm going to say, to ask, the first one is, I'd like to get an idea of how I can find a group to attend to be connected with people like me. And would you explain to the group, and I'm going to jump ahead a couple of slides, looking at our February programs, and explain the difference between a webinar and these other programs that we offer.
Yeah, happy to. So when we have a webinar, you've just done it. It's kind of the 100 level course. We discussed some things, but it's hard to get into the details, right? So it's kind of the survey course. But then when we get into something like Jumpstart, now we're talking something a little bit more specific. We're going to spend some time in small groups where you can discuss issues, strategies, barriers, how to overcome them, and it's guided. So it's a facilitated situation. So two of our faculty, our consultants, will generally run that. They'll facilitate kind of introductory comments and then kind of set it up for you on how these small groups are going to go. And similarly but different are coaching sessions. They're shorter, but they're really zeroing in on how to overcome internal and external barriers, how to really keep yourself motivated. So say you're in the process of doing something like exercise, for instance, but you're finding it really hard to be able to stay motivated, to stay involved in it. So a coaching session is where you can bring those kinds of issues to, again, a small group that's facilitated and really talk about, how do I work through this? How do I persist with whatever it is that I'm interested in doing? So each of these will, in the course of a month, will build upon this webinar, and they're all going to be on aspects of social connection and avoiding isolation. And there's aspects when you live alone, or you would rather not, but that's how things have turned out, right? How do you make those meaningful connections? Relationships aren't always perfect, right? We're saying, oh, make relationships. Sometimes they're darn challenging, and they can create an awful lot of stress. So how do you work through that? And then when there's conflict, how can you strengthen that relationship? And that's a huge challenge. But I can tell you that the person who's going to provide that coaching session is the person you want to listen to, because she can really, really help you in understanding that and navigating through those difficult relationships.
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing about that, Kathy, is that we're going to move people into breakout rooms so they can have small group conversations with other people with MS and or support partners. So it's just really a nice opportunity to meet people online in a safe environment. And we do all the heavy lifting and the legwork. You don't have to worry about it. You just need to log in, to Zoom, and we provide all the links and whatnot. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to take the next step and join our Jumpstart program Friday and or our coaching session. And these are very much more interactive programs. What we're trying to do here with the webinar, as Kathy said, was give you information, and now we're going to try to learn and use and grow from that.
And the technology is cool. You just sign on, and then Laura and her team, they do all this magic behind the scenes, and they move us into small groups. And all of a sudden you're in a group, you get to meet people, know where people are from. I've only been with Can Do for a month, and I've had an opportunity to participate in the January sessions. And I got to tell you, they were pretty cool. I really enjoyed it. It was different than anything else that I had previously participated in.
And the other nice thing too, Kathy, is that we will have an opportunity for more questions and answers.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we've had such great information today that we're going to have to end this webinar. And I really want to thank the participants out there for the dynamic questions and participating and giving suggestions and ideas. It was really wonderful to see you out there participating and giving ideas. And there were really some fun, neat ideas too. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to, first of all, thank Kathy and Kathy. It's been great having you tonight. And then I'm going to go backwards in my slides and just remind you that you can connect with us. The webinar might be over, but we want you to stay connected. You can follow us on social media for the latest programs, resources, and MS news. And you can also register for our e-news by visiting cando-ms.org. Again, I can't encourage you enough to join our February programs and our monthly. We're going to be doing this every month, all year long, and we want to get to know you. And this is a great opportunity to make that happen. Anyway, the National MS Society is a great resource that you can utilize. Their mission is to help people affected by MS live their best lives as they stop MS in its tracks, restore what has been lost, and end MS forever. You can explore the Society's programs, services, and resources and connection opportunities at nationalmssociety.org. And for our Canadian friends out there, there's also some great resources to be found at the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada. And as always, we'd love to encourage you to participate in our webinar series. The next webinar Wednesday is March 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the first Wednesday of the month. So this year, our webinars are on Webinar Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month. The topic is going to be staying resilient to MS transitions. So with that, I'm going to once again thank Kathy and Kathy. It's been wonderful having you tonight.
Thanks. It's been great being here.
Actually, it's been great. Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot.
And at this part of the webinar, the thing that I like to do most is thank everybody out there for joining us. We so appreciate you giving your time to us and being part of the Can Do MS family. So thank you for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you again for another program and meeting you at one of our interactive programs. So please join us again. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.